Okay, just to start off this recording, there's been a question about what we want to know about an occupant who may need to replace a heating system in their house. So they may have been put in that position. Some people may be responding to, what do you want to know about an occupant who is going to make a transition? And so these are going to be characteristics of an occupant. If you felt like the question was different for you, then you can say what question you answered. Ooh, I'm not going first.
Yeah, that's just order on my screen.
Okay, well, you could, it looks like Zara's going first. It shouldn't be the facilitators going first ever.
From my point of view, efficiency in power consumption, something leading to reduced electricity bills, maybe better appliance with efficient power consumption would make an occupant to change.
Can you put that in the chat, Zara?
Yeah.
And it's okay to speak, but also put in the chat so we have a record.
I put it.
Okay. Chris, you can speak out too. You don't want to just
No,
say
I was
one.
just preparing my response and then I hit the enter button too fast.
Just say maybe one thing. Go ahead. I'd like to hear voices. So not all in the chat, but I also want a record in the chat if that's not too much multi-channel.
I would like to know a little bit more about what kind of awareness they have about the options that are available to them.
Mine's almost the same. I have, does the occupant feel they have enough knowledge of the subject to make the change or enough access or resources to do so, And I just deleted my message.
Next. I think like in a US context, I'd want to know race and ethnicity characteristics in addition to like what other people said that's kind of different.
Next. I would like to know if they rent or own the home. Karthik, I think you're next.
Yeah, I'd like to know if they trust the program or the government running the program.
Okay, so I have here kind of what are the best methods for occupants to be reached? So like if there are 100 yard signs in your neighborhood and a billboard, would you become more curious about something? Do they need to know someone else who made a change first? As an example, I didn't order anything on Temu until my sister-in-law did, and she said it was a legit website. I'm not convinced it's legit yet, but maybe it is. Maybe this is a question about the level of influenceability and trusted influences.
Something that has not been said, although a lot of things I thought about have been mentioned, how risk averse they are or how they think about risk in terms of the heating.
Sorry, it's extremely sunny. I had out here, so I have to wear sunglasses. I'm not trying to look cool, I swear. Um, for me, as a social scientist, I go to the things like the theory of planned behavior, um, uh, which would it's got a lot of moving pieces, but it would sort of posit the behavior as a function of a range of what you might call social norms, but also more internal things like perceived behavioral control. In other words, how much control people think they have over the situation or over the choice, which kind of gets, I think, at Ellison's point about renters versus owners. And then, I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry. I'm looking at my phone. I think also that, we know that financial considerations are really important, but exactly what that looks like. I mean, there's been a lot of work on, I shouldn't say a lot of work, but there's a fair amount of work on like household decision making and debt avoidance and sort of debt acceptance as constructs. Um, but there's probably a little bit more to how households think about money. So I think there's still some things to uncover there, and a lot of that work has also been done in Europe, also in Europe, in sort of like Western European nations, where the U.S. context and other contexts are, of course, very different. So those are kind of the things that my mind gravitates towards.
Yeah, I have a lot of things that everyone has. I guess what I had that no one has said yet. I'd like to figure out their attitude towards comfort, like how different indicators to try and point to how they view comfort in their home. Uh, do they have like a smart thermostat? Do they care about what temperature they set there? Do they even know about that? Uh, do they have very leaky homes? Something about I would want to characterize their view of their own comfort in the home.
And I think, Rachel, we can go back around to the beginning. So I think similar to Adam's comment on finance, I first wrote how much money they have, or what's their income, but then I realized that's not maybe it. It's more what's their attitude and knowledge about financing, because it's a major purchase. And so if I feel like I have to put it all in, anyway, I might contemplate it totally differently if I knew there were financing options and if I were comfortable with them.
Tammy, I had kind of thought of it the same way, and then I tried to like zoom out a little bit and just thought of what are their perceived or real constraints that'll impact if they make the change. Because if I had to do it, I would think, oh, I can't afford that, and I may never get to the step of even knowing or looking into those financing options. And it maybe it is affordable, and it's just a perceived constraint that I have.
Yeah, so I kind of interested in if their perception about the affordability, what is their thinking process about when they make some changes in their home, will they be able to economically survive that changes? How prioritizing they are making those changes based on their needs, and whether they are perceiving that as a needs or a luxury good, something like that.
Sorry, we can go around again. Do you have anything else that hasn't been said?
Do you want to go in the same order or popcorn?
Yeah, let's, why don't we just go in the same order? And if you don't have anything to say, it's quite fine to say, I don't have anything. Sarah, do you have anything else? You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Perhaps I want to know if they think that they have access to reliable energy resources, something like reliability in terms of grade or other energy resources. What's their perception of their available the access?
Chris, you want to add anything?
No, I would say mine is similar to Stacy's comment about the more or less the sources of trusted information.
Yeah, and I mentioned my interest in the constraints, but I think also because it could bring up things like maybe they think they have the money to do it right now or they need to do it regardless, but maybe they can't take a day off to be at home while the contractor's there, things like that.
At risk of just like stating demographic characteristics, I actually think I would want to know age and gender, because we think both of those probably drive comfort decisions, importantly.
I'm just looking at what people put. I think I would like to know when they need to solve the problem. On scales of like now, the next week, next season, next year.
Can I bounce off of Ellison's with like a related idea, which is like intended tenure? So like how long do they intend to be there? Because I think those are very linked.
Yeah, I think I'd like to know a little more about geography and urban, rural, things like that. And climate sort of in the same conversation.
I would be sort of curious about whether occupants consider themselves an early adopter of technology, where they are maybe on the technology adoption scale.
Similar to the previous point, I was thinking about control and digitalization in other parts of their lives, like how they see digitalized lives, and also the process of putting in a new heating system, how they view that. Like, do they feel like they need to leave their home because there are major changes, or yeah, things like that. Like rather the process of changing than having it afterwards.
I don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to what Christine was just saying real quick, or just piggybacking off of that real quick. Okay. The sort of like comfort with like digitization or like digital tools. I also was just wondering too, like, is there a perception that the technology is too complicated to use? How, if you can't use the smart thermostat, is it really smart?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything additional. I will say that, most of what we talked about, there are um, concepts in the literature that are at least kind of analogs to what you've said, but measurement issues can get really, difficult. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, things like debt aversion. When Ellison and I did a survey about a year and a half ago, I guess, and we reused some debt aversion questions from a prior survey that was done by other researchers. We found that no one liked debt, and like said, no one was saying it's supposed to work out in the when you ask people these questions, that some people were supposed to say, "Oh, I like debt and I like spending money; it's fine," and other people were supposed to say, "No, I hate debt and I never want to spend money," basically. And we found that was not the case. That no one was, you know, was that debt accepting, I guess you could just there's a lot of measurement questions, I think, that putting these concepts into play that are still, I guess, unresolved.
I guess I would add to Stacey's point. I'm thinking about the history of engagement with home improvement. Whether they, have they upgraded windows, how much they're involved in, fix-ups, past fix-ups, or in, LIHEAP, such programs.
kind of going off that, one of my questions was, where do you usually buy your home improvement goods? Like, do you have a trusted source? Do you always go to Home Depot, or do you have a relationship with the hardware store? And would you know who to call if something went wrong with your house? Or is that just a cloud of fear for you? Do you have a good relationship with making improvements, and comfort with navigating those decisions, or is that outside of your sphere of normal influence?
Adding to the current discussion, I will also be interested in understanding people's perceived risk about climate change. How do you feel that their effort will make an impact on current climate scenario? And another, I'm not sure if Christine is kind of thinking the same way I'm thinking. So she mentioned that risk-averse behavior, whenever people make changes in their household, they're to a certain degree taking some risk, whether positive or negative. How do they perceive that risk? That's also, I'm very interested to understand.
Anything now? Is there anything that has not come up yet? Anything that you wrote down that wasn't brought forward?
Did anyone say what equipment they had before?
This might be too basic, but I would just be curious, or leading, but just curious if they consider making a change like this to be part of increasing their well-being, or is it just maintaining a baseline? Because we're trying to figure it out, but I'm curious what they think, or maybe think about it at all.
I
So
think
one
so
of the-
there's like so many I think that there's so many potential interactions between many of these questions, and I had written down something about like brands and brand names, like Lennox and Train versus Bryant as an off brand. And what maybe this is sort of getting to, and I don't know that this is necessarily about an occupant, but it's more a question on the vendor side, is like, are different parts of the population, when we start learning about who the population is that's like accessing changes, are they being segmented in some way into different technologies or something? So if someone perceive, like, what's the I don't know, it's kind of messy, right? But the perception of the installer on who is buying the system being led into a certain technology choice because of perceptions about the buyer.
May I ask a question? I think Ryan has disappeared, so I wanted to ask a question of Ryan, but he was the only one who brought up a lot of the demographic questions, and I'm curious, did those did not arise for other people, or did you not say them because Ryan had already said them?
I thought those things were kind of being captured already as and discussed previously, or I don't know. all the government programs all capture all this information now all the time for all the programs that are being run. So maybe I just thought it was like an obvious set of questions that would be included, but I didn't write them down.
I mean, which
Yeah,
of
so
Brian's,
go ahead, Narsima.
sorry, which of Brian's comments were you talking about?
Well, the first thing he said was race, I think, and demographic characteristics, and then he said age, and no one else had said those. I was just curious if other people hadn't thought they were relevant, or maybe more to the point and to be discussed later. Are those perhaps proxies for other things that are societal or cultural? Or anyway, that's probably a bigger question to unpack than we have time for here.
Yeah, I didn't put them for that reason, actually. But I do think they're proxies, and I'm not really sure what it reflects, but I do think they are both really important proxies.
So, Rajul, do you want to go through the personal exercise now?
Yeah, so just before that, I had a question for Stacey. I'm kind of curious about her comments about the validity or reliability of the messages that people receive. Like, what are some of the validation do you feel that should be in terms of those message dissemination? Like validity from the government website, or like what validation would a consumer or a occupant will look up to?
I'm not sure how to answer the question. I could imagine like the study or the research setting up, like some sort of survey questions that get at rank your most trusted resources in order of which you trust them. Like, how do you prefer to hear about information? If your neighbor told you about this, would you be more likely or less likely to make a change? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
thank you. It's kind of a interesting perspective. I haven't thought about it. Yeah, thank you for the addition. So the next one is more modeled as a more like getting to know you exercise. We wanted to know what was the last change you made to your own home that you consider major? And yeah.
You want us to answer in the chat, or are you going to provide an order? How do you want us to do this?
I'll provide the order. Yeah, the chat box should be fine. I'm just documenting whatever people are providing in terms of answers in the chat. So that should be fine for me. said it the most of the things.
Yeah, we're putting it in the chat anyway.
Yeah, sure. That's also fine by me.
We have a lot of questions for Stacy.
I think that's pretty much everybody. Alison, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay, thank you. Another question we wanted to know from you related to each of these particular changes you made current times. What are the two most important factors do you feel you take into consideration when making these changes at your home? In the chat should be fine. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up. Narsim, if you missed, just to let you know, Tam, I had a question for you. Are you more comfortable after making those changes?
Okay,
Oh,
they can
sorry, I
stay in the
missed
chat.
that.
These questions.
Much more. Literally, it's been right here my window.
That's good to know.
I think just to hear from you more personally.
Yeah, I think that pretty much all from us.
Has everyone had enough time to answer if they want to?
You know the situation in the Northeast US, right? Where most people have like baseboard water heating and you can't use an air-to-air heat pump. There is no market for air-to-water heat pumps in the US, which is really crazy. For me to upgrade to heat pumps would be way out of my budget.
No, I think the pre-existing is pretty important. Do you have anything else you want us to do, Raidul?
Um, no, thank you so much for all the feedbacks and suggestions. We really appreciate it. It really helps me actually in particular to understand all of you are from different perspective and domain understanding. Sometimes I feel that I'm more, I would say, short-sighted sometimes. So it really feels to incorporate all your suggestions and feedbacks and make my understanding more strengthened. So going forward, I'll meet with Tammy to make those changes or hypothesis more concrete and get back to you all with more updated research goals and visions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Have a great weekend.
Yep.